Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today to Neosystems webinar, Beyond Costpoint 7, Upgrading to Cognos 10. Previously, we've done 4 webinars on Costpoint 7. First, we did one on the changes between Costpoint 6 and Costpoint 7. Then the next one, we did a deep dive into the security changes for Costpoint 7. More recently, we did one on the CIO's guide for upgrading to Costpoint 7. And then we followed it with the CFO's guide for upgrading to Costpoint 7. But today, we're going to focus on upgrading to Cognos 10. Our agenda today, we're going to do a brief introduction, and then we're going to look at the changes in the licensing from Cognos 8 to Cognos 10. We'll get into the new features, including active reports and collaborations. Then we'll take a look at timing and planning for your upgrade, including some of the technical considerations you should make before starting your upgrade to Cognos 10. We'll look at migrating from Deltek Performance Management to Costpoint Enterprise Reporting. We'll look at integrating with Cognos. And then we're going to open it up to your questions. But don't feel like you need to wait to the end to get into your questions. If you have a question during the webinar, just type it into the questions box. And that way, when we get to the end, we'll be able to get to your questions. Brief bit about Neosystems. At Neosystems, we're proud to say, grow ahead, we've got your back office. At Neosystems, we offer strategic back office services, including accounting, HR, and IT. And consulting forms an umbrella over these services, including implementations, upgrades, business process reviews. And within our secure private cloud, we're currently hosting 400 companies with 23,000 employees. With me today, I've got Ryan Pastoric. Ryan's got over 15 years of experience with Impromptu and Cognos. He's been with Neosystems for 6 years now. Prior to that, he was with Deltek for 7 years. And before that, he was an end user using Costpoint and Impromptu. As I mentioned, I'm Brian Giblin. I'm a product manager here at Neosystems. I develop new products and service offerings to meet your most pressing business challenges. I also roll up my sleeves and manage some Costpoint 7 hosting migrations. A little more about our experience at Neosystems. Neosystems is a Deltek Premier Partner. We're also an IBM Advanced Business Partner. Our consultants have completed hundreds of Costpoint and Cognos implementations, and our experience, it spans to the end users through our managed accounting services. We are one of the first Costpoint 7 beta customers program going back to 3 years ago to Q2 2010. We have completed Costpoint 7 upgrades with several in process, and one of our clients has been live on Costpoint 7 in our hosting environment for 6 months now. We have clients live on Costpoint 7 and Costpoint 7 and Cognos 10 in our infrastructure today. And we have Neosystems accountants using Costpoint 7 and Cognos 10 every day. So when it comes to the implementations and the upgrades, we do it how you would do it. We just have the advantage of doing it over and over and over again. Before I turn it over to Ryan, I want to do a quick poll so that we can get a better understanding of you, our audience. How familiar are you with Cognos 10? You're just hearing about it for the first time? You know a little bit, but you want more information? You're very familiar with it and looking to upgrade soon? You're already in the process of upgrading to Cognos 10. Or maybe you're already using Cognos 10 today. So if you'd work on completing that poll, this gives a sense so that as Ryan is framing his discussion, making his comments, he can target them towards you, the audience. So Ryan, I hope this helps to shape your conversation. Looks like over half of them, they know a little bit, but not overly familiar with Cognos 10.
Okay.
So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan Pastoric.
All right, thanks, Brian. I got quite a bit to cover today. Yesterday in our practice session, I think I got a little long-winded, so I'm going to jump right into it. All right, so first thing I want to cover today is the licensing changes since the Cognos 8 series of products. You're probably aware that as long as you have a maintenance agreement with Deltek, the software upgrade for Cognos is free. You don't have to pay for the new version of the software. But what you might not be aware of is that not all of the features available in Cognos 10 are free. There's a couple new licenses that have been built, license types. They're enhanced consumers, which is a step above your existing consumers, and advanced business authors, which is a step above your current business authors. You're going to need to upgrade some of your users if you want them to be able to utilize some of these new features that I'll be showing you in a bit. But know that your existing professional authors and administrators, since all of your rights roll downhill, they're going to have rights to use all of these new features right out of the gate. So maybe you want to take some time, play around with the new features without investing the money to see if they're worthwhile to you. Let your professional authors and your administrators review it, and then if you like what you see, you can always come in and purchase some additional enhanced consumer licenses so they can consume that content. I can't seem to change slides. Okay, sorry. So let's get into the list of new features that we have. First of all, the free features. These include improvements to the look and feel of the portal. It's just a little cleaner look than it was before, a little easier to navigate, but it's not so far different that you're going to have to retrain your users. It's still similar in where you click to access things. It's just a cleaner environment. There's been some improvements made in the report studio. Makes the life of your professional authors a lot easier. These are, they may seem little to people who don't use the professional author report studio search studio, but they really do help out a lot. Things like instead of having to click on an item and then use the ancestry tree in order to find the entire list, they have a little triangle. You can click on it. It highlights the whole list. Saves you 10 seconds right there. You can disable and re-enable multiple filters at one time. All kinds of little things like that that in and of itself is not worthy of an upgrade, but when you put it all together, it really does save a lot of time when you're doing your development. They've added some new chart options and formats in Cognos 10. By default, when you start a new report, it's still using the legacy charting. So if you want to play around and use some of the new chart options, make sure you go into the report options and you'll see an area that you can check a box that says use, I believe it's disable legacy charting is exactly what it's called. But they've added a lot more flexibility in the charting, a lot more different types of charts. You can really fine-tune it now. I think in old versions it was lacking in this area, and people a lot of times would just export their data to Excel because you can make charts look a lot prettier. But now you really can do that grayscaling and rounded corners and shadowing and all of those fine-tuning for presentation purposes that weren't available before. You can also access external data on the fly within Cognos 10. The thing I'd want to note on this is I consider this to be more of an individual user type of feature. I say that because what you do is in your report, you tell it to point out to an Excel file or a CSV file, and how you tell it to find that is just through, browsing your hard drive or browsing your network. So C:\my documents. Well, if the next person goes in and tries to run that report and that same file doesn't live in that same area, the report's not going to run right. So it's a great feature for individual users who maybe need to integrate a small spreadsheet in with existing Costpoint data. But if you're looking for a system-wide solution for that, I still would lean towards doing it on your server as an additional ODBC connection that you model in your framework. But it is a great new feature. Lifecycle Manager is a product that's been added to the suite. This product is used for assisting you in your upgrades. What you do with it is you point it to your old environment and your new environment, tell it which reports to run, feed it all the parameters that it needs to know at runtime, and then it'll go out and run both those reports and compare the results with each other to make sure that you're still getting the same thing. There's also some performance improvements with a dynamic query mode. They've made similar types of enhancements in Framework Manager like they did in Report Studio, that unless you're an administrator and in there every day working on it, it's not worthy of listing the enhancements, but they've certainly made some improvements on that make that type of job a lot easier to do. And then in line with the improvements to the look and feel of the portal, they've also improved the server administration area. I feel it's easier to navigate, cleaner, better information without having to use as many clicks to get there. As for the stuff that's going to cost some money in order to get, we're looking at Cognate Workspace. And if you're familiar with Cognate 10 and you've maybe seen some demos from IBM, they used to call this Business Insight. But now they've come out with a new product called Cognate Insight. I think there was too many insights going on, so they've renamed this to Cognate Workspace. They also have a Cognate Workspace Advanced for editing content, active reports, collaboration, and Cognate Mobile. These are all the types of new features that are going to require either professional author and above to your existing users, or you're going to need to upgrade some licenses in order to fully utilize all these capabilities. And I'll get into more details on each one of those. So let's look at the Cognate Workspace first. What you need to keep in mind is this is an integrated workspace. It's a flexible, free-form area for you to build a dashboard. If you've done portal pages in Cognate 8 before, you may have had that same headache I've had where you don't always want it to be one row, one column, two column, or three columns. You want to have the first row span the whole width, and the second row be two columns, and the third row to be three. And to do that, you have to nest pages inside pages. It really gets difficult to manage and maintain and just keep track in your head where everything's coming from. But with Cognate Workspace, you have a free-form page that you can just drag items into, resize, move around. You're not bound by those same restrictions that you are in portal pages. They've also added some new objects to be used within Cognate Workspace. The one I mentioned by name and I have on the slide here is the slide filters on dates. If you're looking at the screenshot, that's that top bar at the top. And with there, you can kind of drag that beginning thing in and the end, drag the beginning to the right, the end to the left, pick whatever range you want. And because there are shared variables between the objects, as long as all of your individual charts on that page are pointing to that filter, as soon as you move that slider, it updates everything on the page. There are other types of shared variables that you can use. I know it's real small, but on the far left of the screenshot is a checkbox list. That could be a list of users or projects or organizations or accounts. But whatever it is, you pick what you want to see, you hit update, and as long as you've pointed all of your different charts to that variable, everything on the page is going to change whenever you hit update. And the other one of the most important parts about this is that you can reuse this content. So what you're doing is you're bringing individual report properties or report objects onto the workspace, and then you're able to move them around and do some manipulation. I could make a similar report in Report Studio right now, but if I wanted to reuse, let's say, the revenue plan versus actual chart, which you see on the top right, in another report, I'd have to open up the first report, open up the second report, copy it from one to the other, and it's not as simple as that because first you need to copy the query before you can copy the report object. And if there's variables, you have to copy the variables. So you have to do everything in the right order. It can get tricky. In here, what we're seeing on this screen is 6 individual reports that were just dragged and dropped onto the workspace and then organized the way you want to see it. If somebody else wants to build a workspace that has 2 or 3 of these items, they can drag them in, move them wherever they want. So everything on here would then be reusable over and over again on multiple workspaces. Along with Cognate Workspace, you've got Cognate Workspace Advanced. This is a brand new studio that was built in Cognate 10. It's a combination of Query Studio and Analysis Studio. Kind of has the ease of use of Query Studio, but with a lot more features. I think IBM took a lot of input from their user community, and people liked how easy Query Studio was, but they wished that it could do more. So that's the idea of Cognate Workspace Advanced. It has a lot more options than you had before in Query Studio, but it's not as difficult to use as Report Studio is. Workspace Advanced can read and edit existing Query Studio and Report Studio reports. So if you have existing content that you want to start using in Workspace Advanced, go ahead and open it up. It's definitely going to read your Query Studio reports without any issues. The only time you're going to have any issues is if you try to read a Report Studio report that is utilizing stuff that isn't available in Cognate Workspace Advanced. Things like multiple pages, certain types of objects are not readable in Cognate Workspace Advanced. But it'll at least open it and give you the opportunity to fix what didn't migrate over properly. And what you can't really see from here is Cognate Workspace Advanced does work hand in hand with Cognate Workspace. Let me go back to the last slide, and you can see that the chart that I'm looking at in the slide I was just on is that bottom left-hand chart. What happens in Cognate Workspace is if you hover over an object, and as long as you have the right levels of permissions to do so, you get a menu bar that pops up and you can click on a button that says Do More. So when you do that, it opens up in Cognate Workspace Advanced. You have an opportunity to modify the report, and when you're done, hit the Done button, and it saves those results into your workspace. So they do work together, but you can also just use Cognate Workspace Advanced as a completely independent studio like you currently would use Query Studio or Report Studio. Active Reports is another new product that's built into the Cognos suite. It's primarily geared, in my mind, for offline consumption. What it does is you build the report in Report Studio, you give it all of the available options that you'd want to have, and then it builds a file, a single file that's read in a browser that contains all of the data. In that file then, whenever you open up in your browser, it's interactive. You can click on different objects which will highlight, they all work together almost like your dashboard does. These reports can be sent on an email. So if you're heading to the airport and you want to be able to do some analysis while you're sitting on the plane and you don't have an internet account, as long as you've already downloaded your email, you can then open this file up and kind of browse through it and do some analysis. You can run it on schedules. And just like anything, just like any report, you can do all the same stuff. It doesn't have to be offline consumption either. You could just schedule it to update in your portal so that when people come in, they're not waiting for it to render. So that's another good reason for using it. Let me escape out of the slide deck here. I do have a sample of this from IBM that I wanted to at least show you it in action. I think I got a security message yesterday. Every now and again, depending on your rights on your computer, you might have to turn on ActiveX controls. But as you can see, this just opened up in my browser. It's a .mht extension, saved local. But everything in here is interactive. I can switch between North America and Europe and Asia. And it's not really retrieving the data live at that time. It's because when I built the report, I built it so that it knows what all options I want the user to be able to select on. And that's why this happens so fast. So this is all just within one page. I can also have multiple pages. And things can interact with each other. You click on an object within a chart, it changes data in another chart. So it's a really interactive, user-friendly interface that you can work offline. It's got some, it's going to take some time for your developers to figure out how to use it. It's not a very easy thing to embrace. It'll take some effort, but it really is a great tool. The next thing I wanted to talk about was collaboration. There's a couple different pieces of collaboration that you have. What I'm showing you on here is kind of sharing insights and making comments on report results within your integrated dashboard. As you can see, this is still a screenshot of a piece of the dashboard I showed you earlier. I kind of looked at this chart and said, oh, what's going on with outdoor production? And I wanted to add a comment so that the next person that comes in and opens up that workspace, they're going to see my comment and have an opportunity to add their own. And we can have a conversation back and forth on this without having to sit in a conference room together and go over the results. But what I think is even more powerful, beyond just adding comments to reports, is being able to assign tasks that are traceable to other users. So in the same line of, I'm worried about outdoor products and why they're not performing the way they should, I created a task in here. And some of the things I can do, I assign it to multiple potential owners. I didn't know whether it was going to be, you know, my first sales rep or my second sales rep. There could be 50 people on here as potential owners. I wanted them all to get an email saying, you know, there's something going on with outdoor products. Can you take a look? And once one of the people go in and claim ownership, the other people will know that it's been claimed, so they're not going to be duplicating efforts. They'll say, okay, you know, sales rep 1 got it, so I'll let him run with it. And at that point, it'll be assigned to that person. You know, they got due dates, start by, statuses. I've given them some links to reports that they can review in order to see what I was talking about. And then when they report back to me, I'll be notified of what they found. And you know, this task will be archived for future sake if we want to go back and see, you know, what kind of history we have on different tasks. So it's a great tool. I can't say it's something that you couldn't do in Outlook right now. You can assign tasks in Outlook, I know that, but it's not integrated with your reporting suite. So in order to do some of the same stuff like adding links to the reports, you have to go into the report, go into the advanced properties, copy this super long URL with a bunch of random numbers and letters, paste that into your task. You know, once they reply on it, you know, it's just not integrated. It's not in the same place. So if you're talking about reports, why not do it within the report suite itself? And then the final new feature I wanted to bring up was the Cognos Mobile. What you see on the screen here on the far left is within the actual portal itself. I went in and did run with options on a report. And we've all probably done this before. Definitely if you've been using Cognos 8, you've done it. And we've always had the ability to view a report now or save a report or send them my email. But you'll see there's a new option now, as long as you are licensed to use it, to send the report straight to my mobile device. And that's another great idea. I mentioned the scenario of you're heading to the airport, but maybe you're heading to a sales call or something, or you just have a report that takes a long time to run and you know you're not going to be sitting at your desk by the time it's finished. Have it sent straight to your mobile device, and then you can pick it up from there, wherever you are, whenever it's ready. The next 3 screenshots are straight from my Android phone. I just wanted to show you kind of what it looks like within the portal. And it's just a very scaled down version of the portal that's built for small screens. The first screenshot, you know, is just a folder navigation view. So that's the same set of reports that I would see if I logged into Cognos Connection and started browsing my folders. So it doesn't have to, you don't have to go out and run the report and send to my mobile device. You can run it live, interactive, from within your mobile device. The second screenshot is my home screen. So I can take any report that I have and define it as my home. So I'm going to take, you know, my most important report, the one that I want to review every day, every time I log into here, and make it my home page. That's going to immediately show me, you know, the last rendered version of that report. And I don't have to go out and pick it and find it and run it. The next tab I don't have a screenshot for, but it's a favorites tab. So you can go in and maybe select a handful, half a dozen. I don't think there's a limit, but it makes sense to only do, you know, what are your most important reports that you want to run over and over again. Make those your favorites, and then they'll show with a little thumbnail. Similar to what you see on that last screenshot, which is the recently run reports tab. That report showed up there because on the far left, I told it to run and go straight to my mobile device. So anything that you run out of the full-blown portal, tell it to run to your mobile device, that's going to show up in your recently run reports tab. And you can see how there's that little thumbnail. That's how they look on the favorites tab as well for however many different reports that you made part of your favorites. And then finally, I don't have a screenshot of it, but there's the search tab, and I think that's pretty self-explanatory. You can search for reports rather than browsing for them. These are all screenshots from an Android Evo 4.1-inch phone. They do have native apps that work on iPhones and iPads. You know, the iPad looks entirely different than this because it has more real estate. You can open up actual dashboards, you know, Cognate Workspaces within the iPad version of it. But this does work with Android, iPad. BlackBerry, I believe, needs to have a separate piece installed. But as long as your device will run Java, it's going to work on here. So Windows Mobile, I don't think there's any issues with that. And the Android, or with the iPhones, that's why they built the native apps, because it doesn't run. I don't know if Java is the right word I'm looking for here, but next topic. So anyway, this is a summary of all of the different new features that are available and which of the different licenses are going to be able to use those. So your existing consumers, they're not going to be able to do anything more than they can do today. They can benefit from the improved performance and the new, better improved interface and some of that other stuff that was on the free slide, but they can't use Cognate Workspace. They can't use active reports. They can't log into Cognate Mobile. They can't use collaboration. So most likely, you're going to want to upgrade some of your consumers to an enhanced consumer, because what's the point of offering this new content if nobody can use it? So the next on the list is your enhanced consumer. They obviously have rights to consume all of this content then, all of the new features. They stop short of being a Query Studio user. You need to be an author of some type to do that. So that's where we get into your existing business authors. I'm sure everybody has a few business authors, and so business authors can use all of those new features, plus still use Query Studio like they could before. Advanced business authors is what you need, though, if you want to use Cognate Workspace Advanced. So, they can do everything that a business author can do, plus Workspace Advanced. And then we get up to professional authors and admins, which everyone has to have at least one admin, and most companies have at least a few professional authors. They can use everything that's new, plus everything they were able to do before. So just remember, this is the order of hierarchy from left to right, of lesser to more. All of these roles, the rights trickle down. You can't have less rights than a role that's below you. So if you're a professional author, you don't need to also be using an advanced business author license in order to use Workspace. Everything's going to trickle down. So now that I've shown you the benefits of what you're going to get from upgrading, I hope you're a little bit excited about these new features and see that it's not just a bug fix update or, to stay current with operating systems. Let's get into talking about the actual upgrade itself. So the first thing to talk about is your technical considerations. Things like what type of hardware and VMs are you going to use? Are you going to reuse your existing, or are you purchasing new? Now, obviously, there are benefits to using new. It's a clean slate. You got no temp files eating up space. God forbid you have a virus on your server. You don't want to keep carrying that type of stuff over from version to version if you don't have to. This also gives you a chance to upgrade your operating system of your server. So if you're on, if you're using a very old version of Cognos, you're probably on Windows 2003. You want to take this as an opportunity to upgrade your server operating system as well. Now, if you're going to 10.2, which is the absolute latest and greatest, you have to be on Windows 2008 server, so you might have to use new. But 10.1 can use Windows 2003 as well as 2008, so it's a possibility that if you're on an old version and you wanted to reuse, you could still do that, but you wouldn't be able to go to 10.2. And the other benefit, there's no impact to your existing production Cognate 8 if you install it on a new environment and start testing it from there. But I know, not everybody can afford new hardware every time a version of software comes out. So there are cases where you have to use your existing, and that's definitely going to be a lower cost. If the hardware that you're running now is doing a great job with Cognate 8, it's going to be powerful enough to run Cognate 10. The minimum system requirements really aren't any different between the two. It's all about scale and number of users. So if what you have now is covering your need for Cognate 8, it's going to cover your need for Cognate 10. The only problem is you need to have that window where you're testing. Most likely you're going to have a window where you're testing. So for a while you're going to have both versions running on the same server, and that will impact your current production just because of resources that Cognate 10 would be using that Cognate 8 would have otherwise been able to access. The other main technical consideration I want you to think about is your authentication source. Are you planning on keeping the same one that you have now? If so, you don't need to listen to any more of this slide. But if you're not, maybe you were impromptu way back when, and when you went to Cognos 8, you decided that rather than try to redo all of your security in Active Directory, you just brought over that existing Cognate 7 namespace that you were using in impromptu, and that's what you're using for Cognos 8. And that's fine, and in fact you can still use that in Cognos 10. But you might want to take this opportunity to stop using the Series 7 namespace and instead use Active Directory. The one thing I want to advise when doing this, even though that's perfectly acceptable, is don't try not to do that as part of your upgrade. The reason why is when you export that content out of 8 and import it into 10, if at the same time you've also switched your security, your authentication source behind the scenes, that security is not going to migrate over. It's not going to know how to find that same user or that same role within your Active Directory that it was looking at in the Series 7 namespace on the old version. So if you want to change, you want to either do all of those changes prior to upgrading to 10, and you can do that. You can right now add Active Directory as an additional authentication source to your existing Cognos 8 install. Have both running in parallel. Redo all your security. Make sure that everything's mapped the way it should be, so that when you go over to 10, it's already configured to properly see Active Directory. Or do it the other way. Migrate everything over, keeping the Series 7 namespace until you get to 10, and then redo all your security on the other end once you've already migrated the content over. But just try not to do it at the same time. I've seen too many issues with lost security. Your users' personal pages get lost because they're not recognized as the same person. That's another thing you want to make sure you copy down before you try to change authentication sources, is all of your My folders. Next thing to think about is timing and the planning of your upgrade. And this is really the most important part of it. How long do you want to test? Do you want to run stuff concurrently in parallel, or you're going to make just a cutoff? How big of a window do you want that to be? Every company does this differently, but you gotta think about it. This is the most important part, because the technical upgrade itself is not that difficult. It's just a new install and a migration of content. But that doesn't mean you're done. You need to make sure that everything is working still. One thing I really want to stress here is don't try to upgrade Cognos and Costpoint at the same time in parallel if you don't have to. I know there are going to be cases where people have to because they're up against the deadline, they waited too long, and now they have to get Costpoint 7 up and running by the end of the week, and Cognos is already in the process of being upgraded. There will be times that it happens. But if you can avoid it, do so. And the reason is, if something fails and you upgraded all kinds of stuff at the same time, you have no idea why it failed. You spend more time trying to figure out, was this because the Costpoint database changed? Is this because there were some changes in the code in Cognos that caused my SQL to be generated differently? You first have to figure out why it failed before you can even start evaluating what you need to do to fix it. Whereas if you do it in pieces, if you were to upgrade, and I would advise this, if you upgrade Cognos before upgrading Costpoint, when you open that report, you're still pointing at your Costpoint 6 database, so you know there was no database structure changes. So if something failed, you know it's because there's a change in Cognos code. There was a change in the logic, probably, of how your SQL got generated. And you can focus straight on that and not worry about the other side that, oh, I need to go research on the database what changed. Or vice versa, you can go the other way and upgrade Costpoint prior to upgrading Cognos. So now you'd be in a situation where you're on Cognos 8, Costpoint 7. If a report failed, it would have to be because the database structure changed. So you can fix your reports in Cognos 8. Then later, when you go to 10, if something failed, it was because of Cognos, because you've already fixed the database issues. But I definitely, again, I want to advise, if you can, upgrade Cognos first. It's just a little bit less stressful. It's not your back office financial package. So why not knock this one out now, get it off the plate, and then you can worry about upgrading Costpoint before the deadline, which I believe is in October. So what choices do you have as far as your plan? You could do a straight cutover with no testing period. I don't find that to be the ideal situation, but in certain situations, it does make sense. Maybe you've installed Cognos and you never really fully implemented it. All you're using is the existing content that Deltek gave you. In that case, yeah, just treat this as a new install and install Cognos 10, bring in Deltek's new interface, and call it the day. You have nothing custom anyway. But if you've been using it for a while and you have custom reports and you have, you've made modifications to your packages and stuff, I wouldn't advise doing a straight cutover. So really, at that point, you got two options. Install 10, whether it be on a new server or existing, run them in parallel. Run 8 and 10 at the same time, leaving 8 as your production and 10 in a test state. And then your options within there then is, do you want to allow additional development to still occur in 8 while you're testing 10, or do you want to cut that off and say, okay, we're going to be going to 10 soon. You can't make any changes in 8 until we go there because we don't want to have to redo all of our fixes or any modifications that we find when we do our migration into Cognos 10 and start testing stuff. That's a personal choice every company has to make. The first option, no new development, is definitely going to save you effort. You don't have to re-migrate the content like you would if you're allowing additional development to happen, but there are cases where you have to. And then the last choice, I don't have it listed on here, maybe you only have one developer and you want to allow the person to still develop in 8. He or she would need to make sure that if they change something in 8, they change that same thing in 10 so that they still don't have to do that second content migration. So there is another option on here that I don't have listed. So what do you want to test? First of all, you can use Lifecycle Manager. That's what the product was built for. It pointed to both environments, tell it to run the same reports with the same parameters, let it run and tell you whether it was a success or not. I'm a little bit more particular that I want to see it from my own eyes. I want to time it, see how long it takes, make sure everything is exactly the way I want. I prefer to just do it manually. But what you want to not do is just run a report in 10 and say, oh, okay, it passed, it worked. Because there's going to be cases where SQL may have changed. What the SQL that got generated changed, and now instead of passing from table A to table B through table C, it goes from table A to table B through tables E and F. The report runs, didn't give you an error, but the data's wrong. So unless you actually run it on both ends and compare the results, that's going to be your safest method to know that, okay, I can check this report off the list. It upgraded perfect, nothing to do. Now, if it didn't upgrade fine and you have to fix it, make sure you document everything that you had to do. And this is most important if you went with the last option on the last slide, which is run 8 and 10 in parallel and allow additional development. Because if you do that, you're going to have to re-migrate that content again from 8 to 10 at the end of your testing cycle and reapply all of those things you found to be broken. So unless you documented it well, then what was the point of really having a testing period? You'd have to retest everything again after that second migration. So my recommended path for upgrading is install the new environment, migrate your content. That doesn't matter if you're on a new server or not. You'd still be putting a new environment on the same server. Migrate your content from 8 to 10, which is as simple as doing an export and an import. Test, test, test. Document everything. And then if you are allowing that additional development to occur, you're going to have to do a final content migration at some defined point in time and probably spend the weekend reapplying whatever other fixes that you found when you did your initial testing and reapply those fixes so that your new imported Cognos 8 content into 10 is fixed. Then we've been talking about upgrading Cognos itself. What about migrating from DPM to CER? This is really the most confusing part. In fact, I was on a sales call earlier today that we had the same conversation. What you hear from Deltek is DPM, CER, 6, CER7. But that doesn't really tell the whole story. That's the version of the interface from Deltek, but it's not the version of Cognos. So, right now you're probably on Cognos 8.4, maybe 8.4.1, maybe even 8.3 using DPM. So it's both. You have to know both pieces. And you want to go to Cognos 10.1.1 or 10.2 with CER7. So they're two separate things. The Cognos is the software version, whereas the DPM CER is Deltek's interface. So try to separate that in your mind, and that way, if you are going out seeking assistance from a consultant, or even just to keep straight in your own mind, you know the difference. You're not just upgrading to CER. You are upgrading Cognos to 10.2 and going from DPM to CER7. That tells the whole story. Some of the myths I want to get out of the way about DPM to CER is, if you go to Cognos 10, you must upgrade CER. No, you don't have to. You could continue to use your DPM reports and packages and just import them over. The downside to that is you need to have somebody that can maintain that system. You need a good admin to be able to keep your old packages and your old framework up to date with any changes that happen in the Costpoint database. Another myth, if you upgrade Costpoint or T&E, you must upgrade CER. Again, you don't have to, but you need somebody that's properly trained to be able to maintain those systems. The only real exception I would say to that myth is Expense 9. If you're going to time and expense 9, the expense side of the house, the table structure is drastically different than it is now. And although you still, if you wanted to, you could model it all yourself. It makes sense to go to the new CER, at least, if nothing more than to get the new expense piece of that with the new table structure. And finally, applying CER will upgrade your reports. Well, that's not the case either. In fact, if you made customizations to your old DPM package, if you were just swap it out and replace all of those packages with the CER versions, you're actually going to break your reports. They're going to lose reference to fields and items that you had that was custom. So just know that it's perfectly fine to continue to use your existing framework and reports and packages, but you do want to benefit from those improvements from Deltek. So it's a give and take. Everybody does this a little different. It's not a clean cut over to say, okay, I'm going from Costpoint 6 to Costpoint 7, and my database updates to that, and everything moves over. I mean, you really have options in here. You need to weigh all of those, because every additional thing you choose, is going to be a cost impact as well. If you want to migrate and then also update all of your CER. So what options do you have? I think we kind of touched base on them already. You can run with what you have. It's going to be the least amount of effort. All you're going to do is install a new system, export and import, and test. That's it. The downside of that is you need a good admin to maintain it, and you don't benefit from all the work that Deltek is continuously doing to improve their interface. You can override your existing with new. That's an option. The benefit from that, you get all of those new Deltek enhancements. But if that's all you did was override your old packages with the new ones, you're going to lose all the custom work that you've ever done. You're going to end up with broken reports, so you're going to have to spend time fixing all those. So there's definitely going to be work involved with that. So what I see in the real world is a little bit of both. You import your old content. You still continue to run with what you have as far as your existing reports. But then you also bring in that new framework from Deltek so that you benefit from all the work they've done as well. And then over time, what you want to do with this, because on the downside of this, you end up with parallel structures. You end up with two sets of catalogs, two project CPs and two accounts receivable. So over time, and before you go to, let's say, Cognos 10.3 or 11 or whatever they're going to call it, you want to work towards combining those so that before you do your next upgrade, you're back down to one set of packages. Everything's working against the newly updated CER version from Deltek which you've now taken the time and reapplied any customizations that you did on your old packages into the new one. You can do that with scripts. If you save all your logs as you're modifying your framework, you can build scripts out of that to script it into the new package. Deltek has changed their methodology a little bit on upgrades, so they actually issue a script to you of all the changes they made in their interface, so you can apply their script to your existing interface and get all of the new enhancements that they made. So there's a couple different ways that you can do this, but the easiest way to move forward, tomorrow if you were doing an upgrade, is just bring everything over as it is, also import the new interface, and then take your time on a report-by-report basis to migrate all that content over. Finally, the last slide I have is just some additional products that you might want to consider that are integrated with Cognos BI. If you haven't been using Cognos 10 or maybe didn't see a demo from IBM, there's a new product called Cognos Insight. I mentioned that earlier. That's why they changed the name of Business Insight to Cognos Workspace. It's really a local version of TM1. You might want to consider it. It gives you the ability to take an Excel file or CSV, import it into the product, and it'll build a multi-dimensional cube for you, just like a TM1 cube. You can even get a trial version, a free version for personal use. It's available if you do a search on the web. I think you just have to register with a particular website. But you can test it, play around a little bit. But with the full-blown version then, once you've built your local cube, you can publish that right out to your BI portal. And it'll build a package for using for report development. It'll build a TM1 server, so you can use it for budgeting and planning. And TM1 itself, it's the future of planning. It's the next generation beyond Cognos planning that has been around for quite a while. So that's the other product, TM1, and it's been around for a little while, but IBM bought it a couple versions ago, and every version that comes by, it becomes more and more tightly entwined with the BI portal. So it's at a point now where on the same screen you can be editing your budget and running a report straight out of Costpoint, and everything's live because it's the data source itself of TM1 is live in memory. It's super fast because of the in-memory, multi-dimensional. So it really is, it's the future of planning. But if you're using Cognos Planning, I'm not trying to steer you away from that. It's still a viable option as well. They haven't given up on that. They're still upgrading Cognos Planning. So if you're upgrading your BI, you want to add to your plan, upgrading your Cognos Planning as well, because they're still improving it. And then finally, SPSS and analytics is tightly integrated with the Cognos BI portal. So if you're doing budgeting, you're doing analytics, you got some local processing you want to do, you got your BI reports, this is all can be contained within one big portal. You don't have to give your users 6 different URLs and logins, and everything has to be synced up and processes to export and import. It's all fully integrated in one place. With that said, I'm going to hand this back to Brian. I believe he has another poll for you guys, and then we will take your questions.
Thanks, Ryan. And as Ryan said, we're going to follow up with another poll, just building right off on that integration to Cognos BI. But what other products is your company currently using? Are you using Cognos Insight, Cognos Planning, TM1, SPSS? Sorry about that. Maybe you have other products that you're integrating with Cognos. Just check the box, check as many as apply, vote as many as you want. And if you've already voted, you can start typing in questions so that in the question box. And we're going to be closing out that poll in about 5 seconds. Answer quick. 3, 2, 1, close the poll. Let's look at our results. Ooh, lots of other. So 28% of you use other. If you want to type that into the question box very quickly, just what other products you're using, we'll see if we can get another poll going on about that some other time and get back to everyone with the results. I just thought I might highlight a couple other resources that are available to you. just want to mention, when you're thinking about Cognos, we have our Costpoint 7 blog. And in that we cover Costpoint 7. We also cover Cognos and Cognos 10. Great free resource for you. Plenty of information. Get regular posts on that. Feel free to check that out for information. Also at the top of the program, I mentioned our webinars, the CIO's Guide for Upgrading to Costpoint 7 and the CFO's Guide for Upgrading to Costpoint 7. If you want to see the archived recording of those, please feel free to check them out on our website. And now I want to open it up to some questions. And we always get that one question, will I be able to get a copy of the PowerPoint or a recording? We are recording the webinar today, and we will make it available online. One question we have, Ryan, is, I'm still using Impromptu. How will this differ with regard to the upgrade?
It's not a true upgrade. Impromptu and Cognos 8, 10 are different products. They do have some tools that I'm going to just, in air quotes, say, claim to upgrade Impromptu reports. I haven't had a lot of success using those. So in my experience, what you end up doing is, a clean install of Cognos 10 and then redevelopment of your existing Impromptu reports. And frankly, it gives you a good opportunity to clean house. Anybody who's been using Impromptu for a number of years is going to probably have hundreds and hundreds of duplicates and one-off types of reports that you don't really need in Cognos 10. Once you get in there and start seeing the power of the prompting, you can make your report so much more flexible that, instead of having 10 Impromptu reports to do the same thing, you can build one very flexible Cognos report that covers all of it and kind of clean out your environment and reduce the number of reports that you have.
Thank you, Ryan. Got another question here. How does active reports, remember you showed that earlier on, how does it retain the data? Is there an issue with the volume of data and the size of the file?
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't want to, write an active report that pulls PSRs and gives the person the option to pick any project from any period that ever happened. I mean, it's going to result in a massive file because all that data is stored in that single MHT file. So it doesn't refresh, once you have that and it's offline, it's not looking at the database anymore. It has to pull all of that out and make it part of the report. So it's gonna vary based on how you develop your report and what range of options you want to give the people. But yeah, the file could get rather large depending on what you have.
Okay. And I've got a couple of questions about which versions of Costpoint Enterprise Reporting works with Cognos 10. One is, do I understand correctly if I'm currently on, which versions of CER work with Cognos 10?
I don't have a full matrix of that. We might want to go to Deltek and see if they can give us a definitive matrix of which versions belong, with different versions of Cognos. But in a nutshell, though, I mean, any older version can work with the current version. Like I mentioned earlier, you can continue to use DPM with 10.2. It would upgrade those models into the new version. So the only thing you're not going to be able to do is go backwards. So if they built CER7, which is designed for Costpoint 7, you wouldn't want to use that. You wouldn't be able to go backwards back down to Cognos 8. If it was built in 10.1, you wouldn't be able to go back. But you can certainly move older versions forward.
Okay. And will people be able to continue using Cognos 8 with Costpoint 7?
You could. Yeah. I mean, IBM, the Cognos from IBM, it's used by millions of companies against, hundreds of thousands of different types of databases. Cognos doesn't care if you're on Costpoint 6 or 7. So yeah, if you've got reports that work fine right now in an environment that works fine, you can continue to use that when you go to Costpoint 7. At some point, I'm sure IBM is going to transition off support of Cognos 8. And if your support is through Dell Tech, you'd have to follow their lead on if they're going to say, whether they're going to continue to support Cognos 8. But it would work. I wouldn't see any issues other than if you're using tables that have been modified.
Okay, but no issues if you upgrade to Costpoint 7 with your Cognos 8 that you know of.
No, and that's what I said too before. Was you have a couple options. You could upgrade Cognos first or upgrade Costpoint first. Just don't do them together. So yeah, you can go to Costpoint.
Right. Don't do them at the same time.
Right.
And I think I think you were saying that with the Cognos 8 to Cognos 10 upgrade, that's a smaller containable upgrade. So we're recommending getting that done and out of the way, then go on and move your Costpoint 6 to Costpoint 7.
Yeah, if you're looking at it and you don't care about those new features and you don't want to spend the money on new licenses, the other free stuff, though, is still well worth the price of doing the upgrade, which the price would just be labor. So don't think that this has to be a major investment to do the upgrade to upgrade all your consumers either. Just the fact of having those enhancements in Report Studio and Framework Manager alone is worth the price of admission to me. But I'm an administrator, so that stuff truly benefits me a lot.
True. And along those lines of what's free, we had a specific question. Do I understand correctly that if we currently have a Dell Tech maintenance agreement, that the Cognos 10 upgrade is free?
The software is free, yeah. Yeah, you can go out today and download that from their website. And if you have the technical resources in-house to do the install, it wouldn't cost you a dime. Okay.
All right, we have a couple other questions. One question in particular is, Ryan, is very long. It took up the whole screen here. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to suggest we follow up with those offline. And I want to thank everybody for attending today. I hope you found it useful and informative. If you have other questions, like I said, check out our blog. If you have questions about upgrading to Costpoint 7, the blog is a free resource, as well as the webinars. Previous webinars are available via recording, as will this one be. And if you have any other specific questions, please feel free to email us.
Brian,
thank you, everyone.
The other thing here, I just wanted to get to the next slide so they can capture our email addresses if they wanted to shoot us an email.
Oh, great. Good point. Yes. If you want to shoot us an email, emails are on the screen. Thank you, everyone, for attending today.